Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. The main character, after dying in his previous life, he wakes up as Spider-Man inside of Teen Wolf. What is Spider-Man gonna do inside of Teen Wolf?
Someone. Peter's head turned. The hunter saw the lenses. Peter said, "That sentence usually goes bad." Chris stepped forward. "Move." "Why? This is not your fight." The wounded wolf crawled. Peter's sense screamed from behind him. He turned. The werewolf lunged at Peter. Instinct. Pain. Fear. Peter caught the forearm before claws reached his neck. Too strong. He redirected into a wall and webbed the wolf's wrists together. The hunters stared. Peter looked at Chris. See, still not shooting. Chris's expression shifted. Peter had protected both sides from each other. That confused the categories. Good. He webbed an escape line upward, then tore the silver-edged trap from the wolf's leg and threw it at Chris's feet. Maybe don't leave these where civilians find them. He fired 2 web strands and yanked the injured wolf onto a low roof before the hunters could respond. The wolf tore 1 strand. Peter grabbed his coat and hauled. "Work with me." The man growled. "Our fool." They escaped across rooftops. At the edge of the district, Peter left him behind a closed clinic. Deaton's clinic. Derek had mentioned the veterinarian, knew more than he said. Peter knocked once and vanished upward before Deaton opened. The doctor looked at the injured stranger, then at the web on the roof. No surprise. That worried Peter. The next day, Chris Argent stood beside his SUV with a plastic evidence tube. Inside, Peter's web. He had recovered a strand before it dissolved. Allison was beside him. Peter approached because walking away would look worse. Allison smiled. "Peter." Chris looked at his hands. "Mr. Parker." Peter's spider sense whispered. "Not attack. Investigation." Chris asked, "You see anything strange near downtown last night?" Peter shrugged. "Define strain." Allison laughed. Chris did not. "I heard about a masked kid. Internet says Spider-Man. You follow him." Peter made himself look annoyed. "Everyone at school does." Chris held the tube inside the vehicle so Peter could barely see. Biological material. Peter's stomach tightened. Allison looked. "From what?" Chris closed the door. "Probably nothing." That was a lie for his daughter. Peter recognized the shape. Protection through withheld information. It felt familiar. Allison walked with Peter toward school. "Sorry about him. He's a dad." "That's not an excuse." Peter looked at her. She smiled. That line sounded like someone who already knew love and control could overlap. He liked her. Not romantically. As a person who might eventually need a choice her family had already made for her. In the notebook that night, Peter wrote, "Chris Argent, Hunter, not automatically lethal, observes restraint." Then, Allison does not know everything. He stared. He was in no position to judge another family for secrets. Still, secrets around danger had an expiration date. He knew that better every week. Asterisk chapter 14, the morning after. Peter learned the physical cost of webbing on a residential street below the preserve. The call came from Stiles. Something attacked a house. Police. On the way. Werewolf. Maybe. Peter was already moving. The mask went on 2 roofs later. He arrived to find a garage door bent inward. A mother and boy trapped inside. Something clawed the outer wall. Not Scott. Not Derek. A feral beater, half-starved and bleeding, driven into panic by hunters somewhere uphill. Peter landed. The beater turned. Yellow eyes. Claws. Peter felt the warning. He also heard the boy inside the garage. Priority. Hey. The beater lunged. Peter shot 3 webs. 1 high. 1 low. 1 around a utility pole. The first snapped. Second held an ankle. Third changed the angle enough that the wolf missed Peter and hit a parked car. Peter moved toward the garage. The beater recovered almost instantly. Too fast. Peter fired a sheet across its face. Temporary. He grabbed the bent garage door. Pulled. Metal screamed. Inside, the mother held her son behind a workbench. Back. Peter tore an opening. The boy crawled. The mother followed. Run to the neighbors. The boy looked at Peter. Spider-Man. Bad time. They ran. Peter turned. The beater had ripped the web from its face. It attacked. Peter went upward. Web to streetlight. Swing. Kick. He stopped himself from using full strength. Instead, he used momentum to knock the wolf sideways into grass. The beater recovered. Peter fired more web. His wrists ached. The pressure behind them had dropped sharply. Reserve. He had been using too much. 1 more sheet. The strand came out thin. The beater tore free. Peter's stomach dropped. Empty. Almost. He backed. No web escape. The wolf advanced. Spider sense sharpened. Peter used the environment. Car hood. Fence. Tree. He climbed vertically faster than the wolf expected. Derek burst from the dark and hit the beater from the side. The fight ended quickly. Not because Derek killed it. He pinned and growled in a language of dominance Peter could feel even without understanding. The beater submitted. Shifted partly human. Terrified. Derek looked at Peter in the tree. You ran out. Peter climbed down. Observant. You overused. There were people inside. Derek's eyes went to the garage. Then toward the fleeing family. He did not argue. The mother had reached a porch across the street. She held the child. Alive. Good. Peter's hands shook. Not fear. Depletion. He could feel his body starving for calories. Derek looked. Food. What? You smell like your body burned through everything. Peter hated werewolf senses. Derek pointed toward town. Go eat. What about him? The beater was still on the ground. Derek said, my problem. Peter hesitated. The spider sense did not spike. He trusted the limited information. He left. At home, he ate almost everything May had saved, plus half a loaf of bread. May walked into the kitchen halfway through. Peter froze with peanut butter in one hand. She stared at the empty containers. Growing. He almost laughed. Apparently. May leaned against the counter. You're gone a lot. There it was. Peter looked down. School stuff. Peter. He hated the way she said his name when she knew he was lying, but did not know enough to challenge safely. You come home bruised. You eat like you've been running marathons. Your clothes get torn. Peter's spider sense did nothing. No physical danger. This felt worse. May continued. If you're in trouble, I need to know enough to help. Not everything. Enough. Peter thought about his own rule. If secrecy made May responsible for a life she did not understand, tell her enough to choose. Not yet full truth. But maybe more. I'm doing something risky. May went still. Illegal. Peter considered masked vigilantism. Kind of. Her face changed. No drugs. What no? Gangs. No. Then what? Peter shook his head. I can't tell you all of it yet. May folded her arms. That is not reassuring. I know. He looked at her directly. I'm not hurting people for fun. I'm trying to help when things happen. Things. Beacon Hills things. May closed her eyes. Of course she knew the town was strange. Everyone did. They just used different words. She said, you are a teenager. I know. You do not get extra lives. Peter's throat tightened. If only she knew. May saw something in his face. Her anger softened. Promise me one thing. What? If you're hurt badly, you call me before you decide hiding it is more important. Peter swallowed. Okay. No superhero nonsense about protecting me from worrying. The word superhero made his heart jump. May noticed. Not enough. Peter nodded. Okay. The next morning, she left a larger breakfast. No questions. Peter wrote. Webbing depletion is physical. Food rest restore. Then. May knows I am doing something dangerous. The secret had changed shape. He had not told her enough yet. But he had stopped pretending. She lived in a completely ordinary house. That was a start. The family Peter rescued from the garage sent a thank you card to the fire department because they did not know where else to send it. The boy had drawn Spider-Man with 8 arms. Styles found a photo of the card online. Peter stared. Why 8? Spider. I have 2. Branding issue. Peter ignored. The mother wrote. Whoever he is, he gave us enough time to get out. That sentence stayed. Not asterisk, he defeated the monster. Not he saved the day. Enough time. Peter printed the photo privately and kept it in the notebook. May saw. 8 arms. Don't. She smiled. Then she noticed the wording. Her expression softened. That's what you wanted. Peter looked. What? More time. May tapped the sentence on the card and said, You keep saying rescues are about time. Peter looked at the card. Yeah. May sat. The web depletion had frightened her. She had watched him eat until his hands stopped shaking. Then maybe the webbing is not only a weapon. It isn't. Use it like one less. Peter laughed. That's the plan. They started thinking about rescue-specific web applications. No engineering, super tech. Technique. A web sling under a person. A line with controlled stretch to lower someone. A wide mesh over falling glass. A temporary handhold. Peter practiced with sandbags, not humans. Styles volunteered once. May said no. Styles said, I have consent. May said, you have poor judgment. They used a rescue dummy from Deaton Slash, first aid training instead. Peter learned that a web line supporting under armpits caused bad pressure. A hammock shape safer. A sudden yank could injure spine. Slow pulls. Distributed load. These tests made him better. At a later car accident, Peter did not simply rip a driver out. He webbed the crushed frame apart while firefighters stabilized the neck. He listened when they told him to hold. One firefighter recognized him from rumors. Spider-Man stopped pulling. Peter stopped. The firefighter adjusted cribbing. Now. Peter pulled. The door moved safely. The driver came out. No hero arguing with professionals. May watch the news clip that night. They told you what to do. Yes. And you listened. Yes. She smiled. Growth. Peter groaned. Everyone had stolen that word. The 8-armed drawing stayed in the notebook. Not because it proved Spider-Man mattered. Because it reminded Peter the best result sometimes looked like a kid drawing the details completely wrong. Identity unclear. Facts messy. Person alive. Good enough. Asterisk chapter 15. The spider that doesn't exist. Asterisk. Peter Hale learned Spider-Man's greatest weakness without touching him. He watched. The older Peter stood in the ruins of the Hale property, speaking to a hunter informant who was far more frightened of him than loyal. Spider-Man watched from a chimney. He had come because Derek said Peter Hale was spreading rumors that the masked vigilante worked with the Alpha. If hunters believed it, every rescue would become evidence of alliance. Peter hated being manipulated through reputation. The older Peter spoke softly. Tell them Spider-Man helped us. The informant swallowed. But he didn't. Peter Hale smiled. Truth is a luxury people use after fear chooses what they believe. Spider-Man's fingers tightened on the brick. The line sounded too familiar. Not from this life. From the kind of person Elias had always hated watching from the edges. Someone who made other people small because power felt cleaner that way. Peter Hale continued. He interfered with Argent hunters. He moved an injured beater. He works with Scott. All facts. The conclusion was the lie. Clever. Spider-Man dropped from the chimney. You're bad at fan clubs. The informant screamed. Peter Hale looked up. No surprise. You smell like the boy. Spider-Sense snapped. The older werewolf knew. Peter landed farther away. Which boy? Peter Parker. The shared name felt absurd in the moment. Peter Hale smiled. You really should learn what masks don't hide. Spider-Man's voice roughened. You're not going to use that. Why not? Because if you wanted hunters at my house, they'd be there. Peter Hale's smile widened. Good. He liked being understood. That was dangerous. What do you want? Peter asked. Scott. No. You answer quickly. Because the answer is easy. Peter Hale circled. I don't want to kill him. That is not comforting. I want him strong enough to be useful. Peter thought about pack power, alpha politics, Derek's warnings. You keep calling people useful. The older man shrugged. Everyone is. Spider-Man looked at the informant. The man was shaking. Peter Hale had promised safety in exchange for rumors. He was a tool too. Peter said, leave. The informant looked at Peter Hale. Peter Hale did not move. Spider-Man repeated, you can leave. The man backed away. Peter Hale's eyes narrowed. You think giving people exits changes what they are? No. Then why? Because you like rooms where you're the only door. The older werewolf went still. Peter fired web before he could move. Not at him. At the old support beams. The web pulled a collapsed wall sideways, creating a second opening in the ruined room behind the informant. The man ran through it. Peter Hale laughed. Symbolic. Practical. Then he attacked. Faster than Derek's training. More vicious. Spider-Man did not try to restrain with single lines. He used angles. Broken walls. Chimney. Open foundation pits. Peter Hale cut through webbing and kept coming. He wanted the mask. Spider-Man realized mid-fight. Not kill. Identity proof. He changed priorities. Protect Vase. Escape. The older Peter forced him toward a narrow corridor between ruined stone walls. One exit. Spider-Sense screamed. Spider-Man refused the corridor. He went straight up. Will crawl. Web. Over. Peter Hale followed onto the roofline. Running. Yes. The answer surprised him. Spider-Man swung toward town. No shame. He had learned that retreat was not defeat if the objective was denying a trap. Peter Hale shouted after him. The hunters already want your name. Spider-Man did not look back. At school the next day, a rumor had spread. Spider-Man belonged to the Hale pack. A blurry photo showed him near the ruined property. Scott approached Peter at lunch. People think he's working with Derek. Peter looked at him. What do you think? Scott knew the truth. Still answered carefully. I think people like teams because they're easier to understand. Styles looked impressed. That was weirdly smart. Scott kicked him. Peter smiled. They planned no public rebuttal. A masked vigilante issuing statements would only make the rumor bigger. Instead, Spider-Man would keep acting according to his own pattern. Save civilians. Stop wolves when necessary. Stop hunters when necessary. No banner. No pack claim. Derek agreed when Peter told him. People will still assume. Let them. Peter was learning he could not control every story. Only give people enough contradictory evidence that no one owned the narrative completely. Peter Hale had wanted to turn facts into a chain. Peter would answer with more facts. Messier ones. Asterisk Chapter 16, The Spider Awakens. The mountain ash trap was designed for Scott. Spider-Man ruined it because the hunters had forgotten to ask what mountain ash meant to him. The distress call came through a burner phone Styles had found in a previous hunter cache. A girl crying. A ravine outside Beacon Hills. Scott moved before Peter could finish checking. Of course. By the time Spider-Man arrived, the trap was already closed. A ring of mountain ash surrounded Scott. 4 hunters outside. Crossbows. 1 wounded hunter inside the ring with him. That was the clever part. Scott was trapped with someone bleeding and afraid. If he lost control, hunters got proof. If he stayed, they could negotiate. Spider-Man landed in a tree. Chris Argent stood among them. His face tightened. This isn't your business. That's getting repetitive. The wounded hunter inside the ring groaned. Scott stood as far from him as possible. Eyes gold. Breathing hard. Peter saw the problem. The full moon was days away. Still blood. Stress. Mountain ash. The hunters had built a moral trap, not just a physical one. Chris said, Scott can leave when we know he isn't responsible for the attacks. How? He tells us what he knows. Scott snapped. You already decided. A hunter raised a crossbow. Spider sense flared. Peter webbed the weapon to the tree before it fired. Everyone looked up. Chris said, "Don't." To his own people. Good. Peter climbed down outside the ring. He crouched at the mountain ash. His danger sense prickled. He touched. Nothing. Chris's eyes narrowed. Peter stepped across. The hunters went silent. Scott stared. Peter did not like being watched, like a new category of weapon. He moved to the wounded man. Can you walk? The hunter looked terrified. He'll kill me. Scott flinched. Peter said, he's been standing 10 feet away trying not to. The man looked at Scott. That fact mattered. Peter lifted him carefully. Then looked at Scott. I'm taking him out. Scott nodded. Peter crossed the ash, carrying the hunter. No barrier. Chris saw everything. The ring still held Scott. Peter set the wounded man beside another hunter. Then crossed back. Chris said, "What are you?" Peter ignored. He crouched at the line. Mountain ash was powder. A perfect circle mattered. He fired one narrow web beyond the line and dragged a wet branch through it from outside. The ash broke. Scott felt it immediately. He stepped through. The hunters raised weapons. Chris said, "Hold." Spider-Man stood between. Not shielding Scott from accountability. Shielding the moment from panic. Chris looked at Scott. Did you attack the hospital? No. Do you know who did? No. Do you know another Alpha is in Beacon Hills? Scott hesitated. Derek. Peter Hale. Which answer? Peter said nothing. This was Scott's secret. Scott answered, yes. Chris's jaw tightened. Who? Scott looked at Spider-Man. Peter did not rescue him. Scott said, I'm not giving you a name so you can shoot first. Chris looked almost disappointed. Then a howl sounded from the ridge. Not Derek. Peter Hale. The hunters turned. Scott's head snapped. Spider sense flared from the opposite side. Decker. Peter shouted, down. A bolt came from behind them. Not Chris's team. Another hunter faction. Gerard's people. Chaos. Chris swore. Now everyone had a shared problem. Peter used webbing to pull 2 crossbows out of line. Scott tackled one shooter without claws. Chris returned fire with a blunt bolt. The wounded hunter crawled behind a truck. No side owned the fight. Gerard's shooters retreated when sirens approached. Stiles had called police from the road. Smart. Afterward, Chris stood near the broken ash ring. He looked at Peter. You could cross. Yes. You could break every barrier we use. Probably. The wrong answer would be to enjoy that. Peter said, that doesn't make me your answer to werewolves. Chris looked. Peter continued. And it doesn't make me their answer to you. Chris picked up a web-coated bolt. You're going to become a problem. Peter almost smiled. I keep hearing that. Scott waited near the trees. Chris let them leave. Not trust. A changed file. Observe instead of kill. Peter knew because Allison told Scott later after overhearing. At home, he wrote. Hunters now, no mountain ash does not stop me. That was bad. Then, Chris stopped his team from firing twice. That was useful. Then one more. Gerard has separate people. Beacon Hills had more factions than a cafeteria. Peter hated politics. Unfortunately, politics had started noticing him. Asterisk chapter 17. The Spider Who Could Not Fly asterisk. Scott confronted Spider-Man at the high school pool because he did not want to confront Peter Parker. Peter understood that immediately. The school was dark. Pool lights made the water blue and empty. Scott stood at the edge. Spider-Man came down from the rafters. You texted the burner. Scott crossed his arms. I wanted to talk. You have my normal number. Not to Spider-Man. Peter's stomach tightened. There it was. The mask had become a separate relationship. Scott knew who was beneath it. Still, he had chosen the mask for this conversation. What do you want from him that you can't ask Peter? Scott looked at the water. Why he keeps showing up and disappearing. Peter leaned against the wall. That's the job. You decided it's a job. No. Then stop talking like it is. Peter's jaw tightened. Scott continued. You save people, then you leave before anyone can ask if you're okay. You help me, then go home and lie to May. You get hurt and tell Styles before you tell me. Peter heard the real issue. Not Spider-Man. Friendship. Scott felt shut out. Peter looked at him. You have Derek. Scott laughed without humor. That isn't the same. You have Styles. So do you. That's not how people work. Peter almost smiled. The spider sense flickered. Scott was dangerous by nature, but not threatening. Peter ignored it. Scott said, I don't want you joining my pack. Peter blinked. Good. I want you to stop acting like being independent means nobody gets to matter. That landed. Hard. Peter crossed his arms. You want the truth? Yes. The truth is I don't know how much of Peter Parker is mine yet. Scott went still. Too much. Peter had stepped close to Elias. He corrected. I woke up here feeling like my life already had pieces I hadn't chosen. Then the powers happened. Then the mask. Every time someone calls me part of a pack or team or whatever, it feels like another thing deciding what I am before I do. Scott listened. No joke. Peter continued. I need Spider-Man to be mine. Scott nodded slowly. Then why does that mean Peter has to be alone? Peter had no answer. The pool filtration system hummed. Scott sat on the edge. Peter finally sat too, mask still on. This is weird. Yes. Scott looked. Take it off. Peter hesitated. No camera. No one else. Scott already knew. The mask had become armor beyond secrecy. Peter pulled it up. Scott smiled faintly. Better. They talked for almost an hour. Not strategy. Life. Scott hated losing control. Peter hated never knowing whether the spider sense was fear or information. Scott wanted Allison and did not know how to survive her family. Peter worried May already knew more than she said. They were teenagers with supernatural problems too large for teenagers. That was easier together. Then the pool door opened. Both froze. Styles walked in carrying chips. I knew it. Peter pulled the mask down. Scott groaned. How did you know? You both become emotionally honest, only in abandoned school facilities. Styles sat between them. Continue. Peter threw a chip at him. The conversation ended in laughter. Later, on the roof above the gym, Scott said one final thing. You don't have to join a pack. Peter nodded. But if you call, I'll come. Peter looked at him. No oath. No supernatural bond. No claim. I know. That was the point. At home, Peter wrote no rule that night. He wrote names. Scott, Styles, May, Derek, Allison, Deaton. People around the secret. Not people who owned it. People who had become part of what keeping it meant. The page looked more dangerous than any Hunter file. It also looked like a life. Asterisk Chapter 18, Spider Sense Awakens. Deaton never asked Peter to remove the mask. That was the first reason Peter trusted him more than expected. The clinic was closed, lights low. Rain pressed against the front windows while jars sat across the examination table. Mountain ash, wolfsbane, mistletoe, silver. Two herbs Peter did not recognize. Deaton stood behind the table with the patient calm of someone who had seen impossible things so many times that surprise had become optional. Peter kept the mask on. You said you wanted to test the warning sense. I said I wanted to know whether substances triggered it. Deaton nodded. More precise. Peter looked at the jars. Scott said you help. Sometimes. Derek says you know more than you say. Also, sometimes. Peter smiled, despite himself. They began. Mountain ash first. Peter's spider sense prickled before he touched the jar. Not fear. A low warning. He opened. The sensation sharpened slightly. No physical barrier. No weakness. Wolfsbane. The warning rose much harder. Peter's skin did not burn. He held a leaf with gloves. Nothing. Deaton said, interesting. Peter looked. Why? Wolfsbane is dangerous to werewolves because of what they are. Your warning reacts even when your body does not. So spider sense was not a supernatural taxonomy. It detected potential harm. Maybe chemical. Maybe intent. Maybe both. Silver gave almost nothing. A surgical scalpel beside the silver jar gave a stronger warning when Deaton lifted it. Peter stared. That one. The metal. No, you. Deaton stopped. Peter pointed. When you picked it up. Because I could cut you. Apparently. Deaton lowered. The warning faded. Peter's stomach turned. Spider sense tracked potential action. Not just objects. That made social situations harder. Deaton asked permission for one test. I will move toward you quickly with an empty hand. No strike. Peter nodded. Deaton lunged one step. The warning fired. Peter moved before thinking. He ended up on the ceiling. Both froze. Deaton looked up. Peter looked down. That's embarrassing. Useful. Peter dropped. Next test. Deaton moved slowly with the scalpel, but no intention to cut. The warning whispered. Then he mentally committed to touching Peter's sleeve with the blade. Peter felt it spike before movement. He stared. You decided. Deaton's expression sharpened. Yes. Can you change your mind? He did. The warning dropped. Peter sat. That was terrifying. Not mind reading, but something near intent prediction. Deaton said, do not assume it tells you motive. Peter looked. Meaning? I intended to cut your sleeve. Your body only knew an attack-like action was coming. Right. A surgeon could trigger it. A frightened friend. A falling object. A hunter trying to save someone with a knife. The sense protected Peter from harm. It did not understand morality. Peter wrote that. Then Deaton brought out a jar of Canima venom from an old sample. The warning screamed. Peter stepped back hard enough to hit the wall. Deaton immediately covered the jar. That's strong. Yes. Peter had no prior experience with the substance. He only knew the warning was overwhelming, a full-body refusal that made every instinct tell him not to touch it. Deaton noticed. This may be worth remembering. Peter did not touch. They used a metal probe. The venom caused temporary numbness in animal tissue sample Deaton had prepared. Paralytic. Peter looked. To me. Unknown. No hero test. No touching because curiosity. Good. Deaton asked one question near the end. Why the mask if I already know your scent? Peter went still. Another supernatural adult who could identify him. How? Deaton smiled faintly. I am not a werewolf. I know Scott. Scott knows Peter Parker. Spider-Man arrives carrying the same concern at the same times. The mask is useful against people who do not want to see what is already in front of them. Peter did not like the accuracy. Are you telling anyone? No. Why? Because secrecy is yours until it becomes someone else's danger. The phrasing echoed Peter's own rules. He relaxed by 1 degree. Deaton continued. Your body is not part of Beacon Hill's mythology, I know. That's comforting. It shouldn't be. Peter looked at him. The town reacts to new supernatural patterns. How? Attention, hunters, predators, the Nemeton. Peter had heard the last word once from Derek. A place. Power. Something old. Deaton would not explain fully yet. Peter did not push. On the way out, Deaton handed him a small sealed vial. Empty. 4 samples. Peter stared. You want me collecting monster goo? I want you to stop putting unknown substances in sandwich bags. Styles had done exactly that. Peter almost laughed. At home, he wrote, Spider sense reacts to harm potential, not moral intent. Then, Canima venom extreme warning, do not touch. Then, Deaton knows. The list of people who knew Peter was Spider-Man had become long enough to frighten him. But the clinic visit had given him something else. Limits, questions, and one adult who did not treat the unknown as permission to own it. That mattered. Deaton's second lesson was not about venom. It was about samples. Peter had begun carrying a vial because unknown substances kept appearing around Beacon Hills. The instinct was understandable. Collect. Analyze. No. Deaton placed the empty vial on the exam table. What would make you feel this? Peter thought. Something dangerous. Too broad. Something I don't recognize. Still broad. Peter frowned. Deaton pointed to the jars, already in the clinic. Mountain ash. Wolfsbane. Canima venom. Each had a reason for being there. What question are you trying to answer before you collect? Peter stared. He had never framed it that way. If the only answer was I want to know what this is, the act of collecting could create more risk than information. Deaton gave an example. A black residue on a tree. No active attack. No injured person. Peter could scoop it. Or first observe location, smell reaction, whether animal behavior. Maybe enough to decide not to touch. The next patrol produced exactly that. Spider-Man found a dark smear beneath a bridge. His sense warned faintly. He almost opened the vial. Stopped. Photographed. Placed one disposable test strip near without contact. No reaction. Called Deaton. The veterinarian asked, "What question?" Peter looked at the smear. "Is it connected to the venom attacks?" "Can you answer that by collecting?" "Maybe." "Can you answer another way first?" Peter searched. The smear was axle grease. Ordinary. A truck had clipped the barrier. No sample. No lab. No risk. Peter laughed alone under the bridge. He had almost put grease in a supernatural evidence vial because Beacon Hills had trained him to expect significance. That became a useful humiliation. Later, when the red filament appeared, the question was clear. Why does my spider sense go silent near this material? Sample justified. When Canema venom appeared on the guard, question clear. What caused paralysis and how dangerous is residue? Sample justified. When a strange flower grew near the nemeton, Peter did not collect simply because it looked wrong. Deaton examined in place. Normal species distorted by soil. No magical sample. Styles hated this restraint. "You are making evidence boring." Peter said, "Good." Deaton's clinic became less like a trophy room and more like a lab with expiration dates. If a sample had served its question and remained dangerous, dispose safely. Canema venom stayed because treatment research. Red filament stayed because active threat. Ordinary web comparison destroyed after documentation. No piles of monster parts. Peter liked that. It also meant he did not become the kind of person who kept pieces of everyone dangerous enough to study. The line mattered more after he saw what the dread doctors did with bodies. Science could be careful without being hungry. Asterisk Chapter 19, The First Web. The burned-out church smelled like ash long before Peter saw the hunters. Derek texted only one word. Help. Peter changed on a roof. The suit was still homemade, but better now. Dark fabric. Hard eye lenses. Reinforced gloves. No symbol. The church stood at the preserve edge, half collapsed from an old fire. Hunters occupied the front. Derek was inside. So was someone else. Peter heard the roar. Not Derek. A young werewolf, feral with panic, tearing through pews. The hunters had cornered both. Peter landed in the broken bell tower. Below, Derek shouted, "Stop shooting." A bolt hit stone. The young wolf lunged at a hunter. Derek intercepted. Claws against claws. The hunter crawled away. Spider-Man dropped. A web yanked a second crossbow upward. The hunter swore. Spider-Man. Apparently. Peter used webbing across the rafters. Not restraints yet. Lines. A three-dimensional path, only he could use easily. The feral beater saw him and jumped. Peter swung aside. The beater hit a hanging web and changed direction unintentionally. Derek understood. He drove the wolf toward the open rear wall instead of deeper into the hunter line. The hunters fired. Peter's warning exploded. He released one anchor. The entire web lattice sagged. Bolts hit sticky lines instead of bodies. Derek shoved the beater through the rear opening. Peter followed. A hunter tackled him before he cleared. Human. Peter could have thrown him through a wall. He did not. He rolled, webbed the man's sleeve to the floor, and kept moving. Outside, the young wolf had Derek against a tree. Peter fired layered bands around the wolf's torso and both arms. Not enough to hold. Enough to slow. Derek reversed. Pinned. The beater snarled. Then a gunshot. Derek jerked. Blood. Peter's spider sense had warned half a second before. He had been focused on the feral wolf. A hunter on the ridge. The bullet had been meant for Spider-Man. Derek took it because he moved first. Peter's mind went blank. The hunter raised again. Spider-Man fired. A web snapped the rifle barrel down. Second line caught the hunter's boots. Peter yanked. The man fell hard. Peter swung up the slope. Anger made everything sharper. He landed over the hunter. The man reached for a knife. Peter caught the wrist. Too much pressure. The bones creaked. Spider-Sense was silent because Peter was the danger now. That realization cut through. He released. The hunter gasped. Peter webbed both hands to the ground and stepped back. No revenge. Derek needed him. He returned. The bullet was wolfsbane-coated. Deaton's clinic. Now. Peter webbed the feral beater to a tree in layers, while Derek forced him to calm. The younger wolf shifted human. A teenager. Terrified. Peter stared. The hunters had been shooting at a kid. Derek's breathing worsened. Peter lifted him. Derek protested. Put me down. You're poisoned. I can walk. Badly. Derek looked furious. Peter carried him anyway. The young beater followed after Peter cut the web enough to let him move. They reached Deaton's back door. The doctor opened before Peter knocked. Of course. Derek went onto the table. Deaton worked. Peter stood with blood on his gloves. The teenage beater sat in a corner, wrapped in a blanket. Name, Peter asked. The boy hesitated. Isaac. Peter knew the name from school. Quiet kid. Abused father rumors. He had not connected. Isaac looked at the mask. You're him. Apparently. Derek, barely conscious, said, Stop saying that. Peter almost laughed from relief that he could still speak. Deaton removed the bullet. Derek healed slowly. Peter looked at Isaac. Why were hunters after you? Isaac looked at Derek. Pag. New beta. Peter understood enough. He did not judge the bite immediately. Later. Right now Isaac had almost been killed. The church fight changed Peter's relationship with Derek. The older werewolf had taken a bullet not out of friendship, but because Peter had been exposed. Still, he had moved. Peter waited until Derek woke fully. You took that for me. Derek looked annoyed. I was closer. Lie. You're welcome. Peter smiled. Terrible. Then Derek said, You came when I called. Peter looked at him. Yes. You said you weren't Pack. I'm not. Derek nodded. No argument. Calling and coming did not have to mean ownership. Peter liked that. At home, he cleaned Derek's blood from the suit. May had left a note on his desk. Call me when you're back, even if it's late. Peter stared. He had promised. He called. May answered sleepy. You're home. Yeah. Hurt. Not badly. A pause. Good night, Peter. Good night. No explanation. But the promise held. That mattered too. Chapter 20, Flight. The Hale house burned again before Peter understood who Peter Hale really was. The Alpha conflict had been circling for weeks. Scott caught between Derek and the hunters. Peter Hale manipulating everyone. Allison learning enough about her family to stop believing every story. Spider-Man becoming a variable none of them had planned. The final night turned all of it into fire. Peter arrived from the north because his spider sense had become unbearable. The ruins glowed orange. Scott was already there. Derek, Allison, Chris Argent, Peter Hale. Too many people with incompatible goals. Peter stayed above on a broken wall until he understood at least one thing. There were civilians in the lower ruins. 2 trapped workers from a nearby utility crew who had been caught when the fight started. No one else knew. Peter heard them. Priority. He did not join the Alpha fight. He went down. A beam had collapsed across the cellar entrance. Webbing would burn if anchored too near flame. Peter used it anyway farther back. 3 lines. 1 to stone. 1 to surviving timber. 1 around the beam. He pulled. The beam shifted. 1 worker crawled. Then the ceiling cracked. Peter's spider sense screamed. He shoved the second worker through the gap and took the falling timber across his shoulder. Pain exploded. He held. The worker dragged clear. Peter threw the beam aside and followed. By the time he reached the main ruin, Scott was fighting Peter Hale. Derek wounded. Allison had a bow. Chris was trying to stop Gerard's people from turning the entire scene into an execution. Peter Hale saw Spider-Man. Finally, Peter's mask was torn near the jaw from the beam. He ignored. The Alpha lunged at Scott. Peter moved. Not to take Scott's fight. To change the angle. A web line caught Scott's waist and yanked him out of a lethal swipe. Scott rolled. Peter Hale turned. Always saving. Usually the idea. The Alpha hit Spider-Man hard enough to send him through a burned wall. Peter's ribs cracked. Maybe. Healing or not, pain blurred. Spider sense warned again. He rolled before claws came down. Derek attacked from the side. Peter Hale threw him. Scott re-engaged. Peter got up. No clean victory. No one had one ability that solved the room. Allison shot a hunter weapon out of Gerard's hand. Chris blocked another hunter. Derek held Peter Hale for a second. Scott made the moral choice. Not kill when an easier path presented. Peter used webs to keep the burning roof from falling on everyone. Each person had a lane. That mattered. Then Peter Hale betrayed Derek anyway. The older Alpha had been using the conflict to force power. Derek's fury almost consumed the scene. Peter could not fix that with webbing. He did one thing. Kept exits open. When the roof collapsed, he tore a gap. When fire cut the hallway, he webbed a metal door off hinges to create another route. When Allison was trapped behind debris, Chris and Peter lifted together. No speeches. Movement. Eventually, the Alpha threat ended. Not neatly. The police and fire department arrived. Everyone scattered. Spider-Man's mask had torn across the lower face. Scott saw skin. Not enough to reveal what he didn't already know. Chris saw the jaw. Allison saw maybe. Peter vanished upward before the cameras arrived. He landed 2 roofs away and almost collapsed. Web reserves empty. Ribs aching. Mask ruined. The body healed better than Elias ever had. It still had limits. He made it home just before dawn. May was awake. She stood in the kitchen. Peter froze. His hoodie covered most injuries. Not his limp. May's face changed. Zit. May. Zit. He did. She brought the first aid kit. Peter's ribs were already healing enough that a hospital would ask questions. The cuts were still real. May cleaned one. You promised to call. I couldn't. Why? Peter looked at the table. He had reached the point where secrecy was making May manage risk blind. His own rule. He hated rules when they pointed at him. There are things in Beacon Hills. May paused. I know. He looked up. Not rumors. I figured. I can do things. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of things? Peter held one hand above the table, pressed fingertips to the underside, lifted the entire kitchen table 1 inch. May went completely still. He lowered. Then a small web strand shot from his wrist to an empty mug. He pulled it gently into his hand. May stared. Peter, I didn't know how to tell you. She sat across. How long? Since after I moved here. Is that why you keep coming home hurt? Yes. Are you Spider-Man? The question hit. Peter looked at her. He could lie one more time. He didn't. Yes. May closed her eyes. Not dramatic. Just breathing. Then she stood and walked away. Peter felt worse than during the fire. She returned with the plate she had covered for him. Set it down. Ate. Peter stared. May. I'm furious. Okay. I'm scared. Okay. You are not leaving again tonight. I wasn't planning. Good. He ate. The conversation lasted until sunrise. May did not approve. She did not demand he stop immediately because she understood he might not. She did demand rules. Call when possible. No hiding serious injury. No bringing enemies to the house without telling her. If someone might target her because of Peter, she gets to know enough to choose what to do. Peter agreed. Not because she owned Spider-Man. Because she was already inside the consequences. At the end, May asked one question. Do you want to do this? Peter looked. He had not expected. Sometimes. That's not yes. No. He thought about the utility workers. Scott. Allison. The laundromat boy. Sometimes I hate it, but when someone is in danger and I can get there. May nodded. You don't know how to walk away. Peter looked at her. Not anymore. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. No blessing. No heroic speech. Just contact. The secret changed completely that morning. Home was no longer a place Peter had to perform ordinary. That felt like another kind of mask coming off. Asterisk chapter 21, the morning after. The morning after the hail fire, Peter discovered people could turn a blurry silhouette into a legend faster than he could heal bruises. At school, students argued about Spider-Man before first period. He fought the Alpha. No, he caused the fire. He saved 3 firefighters. There were no firefighters inside. He can fly. Peter walked past with a cracked rib and listened. Styles found him at the lockers. Congratulations. For what? You can fly now. Peter closed his eyes. Fantastic. Scott arrived. His face looked exhausted. The fight had not ended anything emotionally. Derek was worse. Allison was caught between family and friends. Peter Hale's manipulations had left residue. The town wanted a victory story. The people inside knew better. At the school gym assembly, the principal thanked first responders from the recent fire. No Spider-Man mention officially. Students whispered anyway. Peter sat near the back. A name appeared on the memorial slide. One utility worker had died after all. Not the two Peter rescued. A third worker had been in another section of the property. Peter had never known. The spider sense had not pointed him there. Maybe too far. Maybe already dead. Maybe his attention had been pulled by the people he could hear. Peter stared at the name. Michael Grant. 37. One daughter. The victory story died inside him. After the assembly, Styles found Peter on the roof. No mask. Hey. Peter looked toward the gym vents. I didn't know. Styles said. Know what? The third worker. Styles's face changed. You saved two. There were three. You didn't know. That's not the same as it not mattering. No. Styles did not tell him it wasn't his fault. Peter appreciated that. The danger was not blame only. It was what he did with it. His spider sense had become unreliable after the fire because guilt made every alarm sound meaningful. A locker slammed. Peter flinched. A student ran. Peter's body tensed. A ball flew across the gym. His warning fired. Nothing supernatural. He was treating fear like signal. That was dangerous. Styles said, you need a break. Peter laughed. From Beacon Hills. From patrol. Peter looked. One night. 3. No. 2. Peter smiled despite. 1. Styles sighed. Terrible negotiator. Peter took one night off. It was harder than expected. He stayed home. May knew now. She made dinner. No cover story. The suit hung in the garage drying. Peter kept listening for sirens. May noticed. You can go if there's actually an emergency. I'm supposed to be resting. Resting isn't handcuffs. Peter looked at her. The distinction mattered. No patrol did not mean ignoring a fire alarm outside the window. It meant he did not go looking for danger to prove he cared. That night, nothing happened. Peter did homework. May watched a movie. He fell asleep on the couch. No one died because Spider-Man stayed home. In the morning, Peter went to school. The name Michael Grant remained in his notebook. Not as guilt score. As a person who existed. Peter wrote one line beneath. Spider-sense is not omniscience. That was obvious. It still hurt. Later, Peter visited the utility company's public memorial. No mask. No dramatic gesture. He left flowers with everyone else's. The daughter was there. Peter did not tell her he had been at the fire. She did not need a stranger turning her grief into his confession. He walked away. The mask became heavier after that. Not because it was wrong. Because being Spider-Man did not mean every rescue succeeded. He had to learn whether he could carry that without making failure the only thing he remembered. Michael Grant's name stayed in Peter's notebook longer than any rule. He had expected the guilt to shrink if he learned enough about the man. It didn't. Michael liked baseball, had one daughter, worked utility maintenance for 12 years. None of that answered the impossible question of whether Peter could have found him. Styles eventually took the notebook away. Not secretly. He reached across the table. "Give me that." Peter held. "Why?" "Because you are turning a dead guy into an equation." Peter's face hardened. "I'm trying to know what I missed. He's not a patrol failure." Peter went still. Styles continued. "You wrote times, positions, fire spread, where you entered, where Scott was. You're trying to reverse engineer a version where you save all three." Peter looked at the diagrams. He had. The exercise felt responsible. It had become punishment. Styles put the notebook down between them. Was there a way? Maybe. Do you know? No. Then stop writing maybe like it means yes. The line hurt. Peter closed the notebook. They went outside. No masks. No patrol. Styles drove them to the utility memorial after dark. Not because Peter needed another grief ritual. Because Styles wanted him to see the place when no one else was there. The flowers had begun wilting. One baseball cap sat under the sign. Peter looked. Styles said nothing. After a while, Peter asked, "Do you think I'm using him?" Styles frowned. "For what?" "To make myself more careful." "Maybe." Peter looked. Styles added, "But careful isn't the same as carrying him around like a debt." Peter understood. He left the name in the notebook. He removed the tactical diagrams. Not because they were useless. He copied the useful fire response lessons onto a separate training page without Michael's name attached. Structural search. Thermal zones. Ask responders who is still missing before assuming visible victims are all. The person's death did not have to remain fused to the lesson forever. That felt more respectful. At the next fire scene, Peter arrived after firefighters. He did not immediately enter. He asked the incident commander. "Anyone unaccounted for?" The firefighter looked surprised to be asked by Spider-Man. "One tenant, 4th floor." "Specific." Peter went. Found the tenant. Alive. The method worked. Peter did not think Michael saved this person. That would be another story imposed on him. Peter had learned from failure. The living person survived. Both facts could exist without turning the dead into tools. May noticed the notebook changed. "You crossed out pages. Moved them. Better." Peter thought. "Different." She accepted. Guilt did not vanish. It became less in charge. Asterisk chapter 22, the morning after. The second suit began on May's garage workbench. That alone would have been impossible a month earlier. May stood with her arms folded while Styles spread materials across the table. Tinted safety lenses. Stretch fabric. Athletic compression layers. A motorcycle neck gaiter. Thin padding. A sewing machine May knew how to use far better than either boy. Peter stared. "This feels weird." May looked at him. "Good." Styles pointed at the eyepieces. Version 1 fogged. "I remember. You hit a wall." "I remember." May looked up. "You hit a wall." Peter glared at Styles. "Training." Uh-huh. The suit was not a super science miracle. No nanotech. No armored AI. It was a teenager's disguise, improved by people who cared whether the teenager survived. That mattered. Styles wanted a spider symbol. Peter refused. May asked why. The internet already picked the name. I don't want a logo making it feel like a brand. May nodded. Styles looked wounded. He had drawn 6. They compromised on nothing visible. The mask mattered most. Hard lens. Better peripheral vision. Mesh for breath. A seam that would tear outward rather than drag the whole mask off if grabbed. May came up with that. Peter stared. How do you know? Clothing gets caught. Simple. The suit also needed places for ordinary things. Phone. Small first aid wrap. Flashlight. A folded mask backup. Evidence Vile Deaton had given. Styles wanted a police scanner. May said no stolen police frequencies. Styles looked betrayed. Peter said, we can use public emergency radio. Styles muttered about tyranny. The webbing itself could not be stored. Organic. They focused instead on reducing evidence from his street clothes and making the suit practical without adding unnecessary gadgets. Separate shoes. Boot covers. Different silhouette with shoulder inserts slight. Voice changer built from a cheap electronics module Styles rigged. It worked until Peter laughed. Then sounded like a robot choking. They improved. The first real test was a rooftop swing. May watched from the alley. Peter almost refused. She had asked. If she was going to live with Spider-Man, she wanted to see what patrol actually meant. He climbed the wall. May's face changed despite already knowing. Seeing was different. Peter stood on the roof edge. Ready. No, May called. Peter smiled. He fired a web and swung. The suit held. Lens clear. Boot covers stayed. Second line. Third. Peter landed 2 buildings away. May and Styles drove around to meet. May looked pale. That is insane. Yeah. And you do that at night? Yeah. She closed her eyes. Styles whispered, this is going well. May pointed at Peter. Helmet. What? You need a helmet. Peter laughed. May did not. They compromised on reinforced mask padding, not a full helmet that would destroy mobility and make climbing harder. The suit's first, unexpected flaw happened when Peter landed. One lens fogged from inside. Not moisture. A crack in adhesive. He stopped. Did not patrol. Returned to garage. May fixed. That choice mattered. The old Peter would have said good enough and gone. Now there were people who could call him on it. The second test passed. At school, Styles looked at Peter's backpack. Suit? No. Where? Locker at the garage. Good. No carrying every day. Less chance of discovery. Scott joined later and helped test movement. He attacked lightly in wolf form. The fabric tore at the shoulder after one claw. Back to garage. Reinforce. Derek tested a grab. Mask seam released partially without exposing the face. Success. Allison, not yet told Peter's identity, could not participate. That gap became increasingly awkward. Chris had hunted data on Spider-Man. Allison had school friendship with Peter. Scott had a relationship with Allison, built inside family secrecy. Everyone was walking around a truth bomb. Peter knew. Not yet. But soon, the finished suit looked nothing like a polished comic book costume. Dark red panels, black reinforcement, white lenses, no chest logo. Functional, homemade. Peter put it on. May stared, still hated. Peter looked. The suit. The fact that you need one. That was honest. Styles said, it is objectively cooler. May threw a scrap of fabric at him. Peter smiled inside the mask. The suit did not make him Spider-Man. The choices outside it already had. But for the first time, the mask had been built by people who knew Peter Parker was underneath and wanted him to come home. That changed what wearing it felt like. The finished suit survived its first ordinary school day hidden in May's garage. That was deliberate. Peter had spent enough time treating new equipment like a reason to go looking for something to test it against. May had stared at him over breakfast and said, "You can learn whether the stitching works without finding a werewolf." So he went to class. At lunch, Styles wanted a progress report. Peter opened his mouth. The fire alarm went off. Every table went silent for one beat before chairs scraped back. Peter's entire body locked harder than anyone else's. The alarm tone was different from the one in Elias School. That did not matter at first. Smoke. A beam. A boy's hand. Peter's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Scott saw. Peter. He looked up. Students were already moving toward the exits. No smoke. No spider sense. A drill. Coach shouted for everyone to stop acting like the building was collapsing. Styles leaned closer. You good? Yeah. Peter stood. His knees felt weak, which was insulting considering they could launch him across a street now. They followed the class outside. No mask. No emergency. Just hundreds of students standing on wet pavement while teachers counted. The principal announced a scheduled drill. Peter exhaled. Styles looked at him, but did not ask in front of everyone. Scott did not either. That helped. After school, Peter went to the garage. The suit hung from the back of a metal cabinet. May had added one extra row of stitching near the shoulder without telling him. He noticed. You changed it. You tear things. That is not a reason. It is literally a reason. Peter smiled. He put the suit on for a low-risk movement test behind an abandoned storage building where Styles had permission from absolutely no one to be. Scott came too. May watched from the car. The first exercise was simple. Climb. No webbing. The suit stretched properly. No seam pull. Second. Short swing. One anchor. Landing. Good. Third. Hard lateral turn. The left shoulder seam held. Peter landed. Styles clapped once. Beautiful. Stop. Then Scott said, again, but I moved the target. Peter looked. A rescue dummy hung from a pulley Styles had rigged between two beams. Where did you get that? Deaton. Peter stared at the dummy. Why does Deaton own that? Veterinary reasons. That made it worse. They began. Scott released the pulley unpredictably. Peter had to catch the falling dummy without jerking its neck or slamming it into the wall. First attempt, he caught too high. The dummy spun. May shouted from the car, dead. Peter looked offended. Second, he used a hammock web under the torso. Better. Third, the web anchor pulled a weak bolt from the beam. Peter heard the metal tear. He released before the whole frame came down. The dummy fell 6 feet onto a padded mat. Styles winced. Peter looked at the bolt. Anchor failure. May got out. Which you were testing for. Peter nodded. This was what the second suit had changed most. Not durability. Not appearance. It made everyone around Spider-Man part of testing before the consequences became public. Peter replaced the bad anchor with a known steel support. They continued. On the 7th attempt, Scott changed the problem. He released the dummy and lunged at Peter in partial wolf shift at the same time. Spider Sense fired in 2 directions. Peter almost webbed Scott automatically. Stopped. The dummy mattered more. He fired under it, caught, then used the same tension line to swing the dummy behind a concrete pillar. Scott reached him, tapped Peter's shoulder. Dead. Peter sighed. The dummy had survived. May called from behind them, that counts. Derek would have said something similar and made it annoying. Peter took the loss. Next run, Peter solved differently. He called Scott's name before the release. Your attacker. Scott nodded. The role was explicit. When the warning fired, Peter knew one danger was training and one was uncontrolled gravity. He saved the dummy, then let Scott swipe miss by 1 step. No panic. No overreaction. Styles checked the stopwatch. Faster. Please stop timing my emotional development. I will never stop. The suit's first real night in use happened 3 days later. Not Alpha Pack. Not Canima. A 2-car collision on a wet road. Peter heard the impact from 2 blocks away and changed in a public restroom at a closed park. By the time Spider-Man arrived, firefighters were already working. 1 car had rolled onto its side. A passenger was trapped. Peter landed near the incident commander. Need anything? The firefighter pointed. Hold that vehicle exactly where it is while we cut the roof. Don't lift unless I say. Peter moved. He braced 1 hand against the frame. The new suit's shoulder held. The metal creaked. Spider-Sense warned from the cutting tool, but Peter did not flinch because he understood the source. The firefighter worked. Hold. Peter held. Rain ran off the white lenses without fogging. May's adhesive fix worked. Now 2 inches. Peter lifted. Not more. The rescue team slid a support in. Down. Peter lowered. The passenger came out. Alive. The whole scene took 12 minutes. Peter did not throw a punch. He did not swing between buildings. He did not make the evening news beyond 1 blurry photo of a red and black figure holding a wreck steady. At home, he hung the suit in the garage. May inspected the shoulder. No tear. No. Lens. Good. Did it help? Peter looked. The question was not whether the suit made him stronger. It let me focus on the car instead of whether the mask was falling apart. May nodded. Then it works. Styles texted 5 minutes later. Logo time. Peter sent back. No. A second message arrived. Small logo. Peter blocked him for 11 minutes. The suit stayed plain. Peter liked that. It did not need to announce what he was. It just needed to keep up with what he chose to do. Asterisk chapter 23, the morning after. Peter's first encounter with the Canima began with a security guard unable to move. The parking structure near school had 3 levels, bad lighting, and too many blind corners. Spider-Sense screamed before Peter reached the second ramp. He found the guard on the floor beside a patrol cart. Eyes open, breathing, frozen. Peter landed. "Can you hear me?" The guard blinked once. "Good." Peter pulled out the empty sample vial Deaton had given him. A clear residue glistened on the man's neck. "Do not touch." He almost laughed at how loudly Deaton's warning echoed. Peter used the edge of a plastic evidence strip from his kit to collect one drop. Then a scraping sound moved above. The Spider-Sense became a knife behind his eyes. Peter looked up. Something crawled upside down along the concrete ceiling. Scaled skin, long tail, human shape distorted. The creature stopped. Its eyes locked on him. Peter did not know the word Kanima yet. His body knew danger. The thing dropped. Peter moved. The tail passed where his ribs had been. A tiny wet needle at the tip. Paralytic. Peter fired web. The creature twisted impossibly. The line hit one arm. Held. For half a second. Then claws shredded it. Peter went high. Will crawl. The Kanima followed. That was new. It climbed as well. Peter fired 2 webs between pillars. A net. The creature hit. Stug. Its tail whipped through the openings and cut the strands. Peter learned. Too flexible. Too sharp. The guard needed help. Peter did not need to win. He swung around the Kanima, landed beside the guard, and webbed the man carefully to the patrol cart like a stretcher. The creature hissed. Peter's warning exploded from behind. He ducked. Tail grazed his glove. Nothing through fabric. Good. He pulled the cart. The Kanima lunged. Peter webbed the overhead sprinkler pipe and tore it open. Water burst. The creature's footing shifted on wet concrete. Peter used the second. He shoved the cart down the ramp. Not uncontrolled. A web line anchored to the rear acted as brake. The guard rolled safely toward the exit. Peter stayed behind. The Kanima recovered. Its head tilted. Human intelligence somewhere inside. Peter saw the eyes. Not animal. Person. He remembered Scott. Transformation did not erase identity. Can you understand me? The creature hissed. Great. Peter backed. The Kanima attacked again. Peter refused full-force hits. He used barriers. Car doors. Pillars. Web lines. Every time he saw an opening that might let him smash the creature into concrete, he remembered the human eyes. Then the Spider-Sense flickered in a strange direction. Not from the Kanima. Across the structure, a teenage boy stood on the upper level. Jackson Whittemore. He looked down. Blank. Peter's stomach dropped. The creature moved. Jackson's posture shifted at the same time. No. Impossible. The Kanima lunged. Peter dodged late. The tail punctured his left forearm through the suit. Cold. Immediate. His fingers stopped working. Peter's heart lurched. Paralysis spread. He fired a web with the right wrist. Caught a beam. Pulled himself away. The left hand hung useless. The Kanima followed. Peter swung awkwardly out through an open side of the garage and landed on the adjacent roof. His left leg began tingling. Venom moving. Not enough time. He texted one word to Deaton. Venom. Then location. The Canema could have followed. It didn't. Peter looked back. Jackson was gone. The creature, too. At the clinic, Deaton treated Peter without pretending to have an antidote. How much? 1 puncture. How long ago? 7 minutes. Deaton watched pupils. Scott arrived. Then Styles. Peter hated that they saw him without the mask, half paralyzed on a table. Styles looked terrified and tried to cover with words. So upside, now we know it works on you. Peter stared. Styles swallowed. Bad upside. Deaton explained paralysis should fade if dose small. Unknown metabolism. Peter's healing might clear faster. No certainty. They waited. His left hand returned after 26 minutes. Leg never fully locked. Good. Scott looked at the sample vial. What was it? Peter looked at him. Something that climbs walls. Styles blinked. Well, that's rude. Peter almost laughed. Then he told them about Jackson. The timing. The posture. The eyes. Styles went very still. No. Scott said, Jackson. Maybe connected. He's been acting weird. That's not proof. Peter's rule again. They needed evidence. Deaton examined the venom. Canema. The word landed. A supernatural shapeshifter tied to unresolved identity and control. Peter listened. The Canema could be a person transformed under external influence. Master. Servant. Victim and threat at once. That complicated everything. Peter looked at the numb hand. Then we do not kill it because it's easier. Scott nodded. Styles said, Gerard absolutely will. That was the next problem. Hunters would see monster. Peter saw a person somewhere inside. At home, May inspected the puncture after Peter told her what happened. She did not ask him to stop immediately. She did say, you need a better plan for poison. Working on it. That is not a plan. Peter smiled. Deaton's helping. May's expression softened only slightly. At school the next day, Jackson passed Peter in the hall. He looked tired. His reflection in the trophy case moved half a second late. Peter's spider sense prickled. Jackson looked at him. What? Peter forced an ordinary shrug. Nothing. Not yet. He followed from a distance after school. No mask. No accusation. The mystery was now personal. If Jackson was the Canema, saving people might mean saving him from himself before everyone else decided the simpler solution was a body on the floor. The paralysis test Peter asked Deaton for did not involve venom. Peter had already learned the important part. Canema venom could shut down limbs. What he had not learned was what he did when a limb stopped being reliable. Deaton tied Peter's left arm lightly to his torso with a sling. No venom. Obviously. You're disappointed. I'm not. Styles sat on the clinic counter. You sound disappointed. Peter ignored. The drill was simple. Move from one end of the room to the other, while Deaton tossed soft foam blocks unpredictably. One arm unavailable. No web from left wrist. Spider sense active. First run, Peter did fine. Second, Deaton tied the right arm instead. Harder. Third, one leg with a brace limiting knee movement. Peter fell. Styles laughed. Peter threw a foam block. Then Deaton changed the problem. Now rescue. A weighted dummy lay near the exam table. One arm unavailable. Peter's instinct was to lift. The dummy slid. Bad angle. Could injure a real neck. He adapted. Web from one wrist to create drag sling. Use legs. Move slowly. The drill became ugly.